So, Dr. Jordan, you're a pediatric developmental and behavioral pediatrician. Or tell me a little bit about exactly what you're doing as a doctor.
That's a mouthful. What it means is I'm a physician, I'm a pediatrician, but then I did a 2-year fellowship in developmental and behavioral pediatrics. And that can mean a lot of things, but for me, it means I stopped doing medicine 30 years ago, and now I function as a counselor. And my practice the last dozen or so years has been just girls, mostly middle school, high school, and college. So I function as a counselor. I run summer camps, weekend retreats. I just got off the phone 10 minutes ago. My wife and I talked to a 3rd grade class via Zoom, helping them with what's going on. So I do a lot. I travel, talk, write, do podcasts, do blogs. So I do a lot of different things.
Well, my kids, based upon the pandemic here, have been home now for about 6 weeks. Everybody's starting to get to be a little bit stir crazy. And I wanted to have someone come in because I'm not alone. Michigan's in a shutdown pretty much right now, and lots of families have their kids at home. And wanted to get some tips for you about how we can all cope together during this public health crisis.
Yeah. I think you're feeling what everybody in the country is feeling. It's been a while now, right?
Yeah. So, what are some ways that kids can manage anxiety during the pandemic? I didn't think a whole lot about how this was impacting my kids. I'm like, well, they're home, they're doing some schoolwork, they're playing the video games, spending some quality time with the family. But we started seeing some signs of them starting to feel a little bit of stress. And my wife reminded me, we never went through anything like this. They're away from their friends, the structure. They haven't left our house other than to go around the block for some dog walks with me in weeks. What are some ways that parents should look out for maybe if there's some problems? And how can we help our kids with, the anxiety that this might be causing?
My wife and I just literally 10 minutes ago got off the phone. We worked for about 45 minutes with a 3rd grade class. And we'd work with this class about 5 times this school year. So they know us. And so we did a Zoom visit just to touch base with them. So we were asking them, give us one feeling word that you're feeling right now. These are 3rd graders. And the most common word was anxious. A couple of the kids said stressed. And we asked, what are you anxious and stressed about? They're anxious about, sometimes it's just the overall, but also specific things like they have grandparents who they're worried about. One of them said their dad had heart surgery a year ago. He had a heart attack, so she's worried about her dad. One little boy said his grandmother is in a condo and there's not other people around, so he's worried about her getting the virus. So they all had a lot of little concerns, not huge things, but for a 3rd grader or a 5th grader or whatever age, it can seem bigger. So I as a parent, I would make sure there's enough quiet time where you can ask, how you guys doing? Because what most of these kids said, we asked them, what are you doing with all those emotions? The most common response was keeping busy. And it's not wrong to do things that are fun. It's not wrong to do things with your family. That's great. And sometimes it's important to have some quiet downtime where you say, let's get real. How you guys doing? Anything you guys might be worried about? And so they have a space to do that.
Okay, good. So I guess it's important, to focus on staying emotionally strong. Do you have any tips on how to go about making sure that they're staying in a good peace of mind there?
Well, one of the most important things, and I don't think we think about this enough, is that I've learned in my 30 years of counseling kids that kids almost always tend to reflect the adults around them. And so a lot of parents are now starting to say things like, there's a little bit more struggles in our house. People are getting on each other's nerves. There's a little bit more barking at each other. And so I always tell parents, look at 2 places first. Number 1, look at yourself. How are you doing emotionally? Because if you're stressed, if you're tense, if you're anxious, if you're distracted, that's the big one. If you're distracted by the economy and finances and your parents or wherever, then kids will pick up on that and then they will react in some way. I also tell parents, look at your relationship if you're married. How's that? If it's tense or if there's bickering or barking or arguing and things, then kids also will react to that. So one of the most important things is take care of yourselves. Make sure you're taking care of your emotions, however you do that, whether it's talking to each other, talking to a friend, talking to your parents, doing counseling, whatever it may be, exercising, getting enough sleep. If parents are not taking care of themselves, that kind of distraction, tension, restlessness, all those things will be reflected in their kids. So that's
Okay.
one important thing I would think about.
So as kids are home for the foreseeable future, I know it sounds like our kids are going to be home through the summer now. What are some tips you think kids should be doing throughout the day to stay healthy?
Well, I've been encouraging kids to find ways to get out of themselves and be of service to other people. Because I think we know from a lot of research that whether you're anxious or depressed or going through hard times, that one of the best ways to emotionally get through that is to be there for other people. We asked the kids today, these third graders, a little while ago, what are some ways they've been doing that? And they give us a whole list of things that they're doing. There's one little girl who I counsel. She lives in Oklahoma, and she told me she's 9 years old. She was feeling bad for people in like elderly places, like the nursing homes, because people can't visit them. So she loves to paint. So she painted all these really pretty pictures, and they took them to the nursing home, and they couldn't go in, but they put the pictures on the windows facing in where the old people were eating, so they would have something pretty to look at. Kids are doing some drawings on their sidewalks, making colorful things. One little boy, a little while ago, he's a third grader, he said he's been riding his bike around to get exercise, and he said, I've been trying to make myself smile at people who I drive by on my bike.
Right.
That's
That's a good point, because you see people going by you and you don't want to be too communicative, but then you seem like you're being standoffish. A nice wave or a smile probably goes a long way.
Yeah, but so getting out of yourself and being there for others is a great way to deal with your feelings of anxiety, because then you're not thinking about you, you're thinking about other people. And those little acts of kindness spread, and you start to feel good about yourself. One little girl, that third grader, said that her little sister was having a hard time falling asleep. And so she would go up in her bed and read her stories. And then she's become the one in her family now, the only one who can get her little sister to sleep. So she's feeling extremely valuable.
Yeah.
And also it helps kids to not feel so helpless, like a victim to all this, right?
Sure.
It's something they can control. A lot of what kids are feeling is a sense of uncertainty, a lack of control. Their whole schedule's been blown up. They can't see their friends. But what can you control? That's one of the things that parents can do, is help their kids figure out, what can you take charge of? What can you control? And one of the things you can take control of is ways you can be kind to people, ways you can be of service to people, whether it's writing notes of gratitude to people, whether it's smiling at people when you ride by on your bike, whether it's whatever it may be. One family is, getting groceries for their grandparents because they can't go out. So all those acts of kindness are ways you can start to take control, be in charge, and then bring good feelings to yourself.
Okay. Are there signs that parents should be on the lookout for to make sure that there might not be something that's like a serious issue to watch out for when it comes to mental health issues or stress and all this stuff that's going on around this pandemic?
I think oftentimes the best thing to do is look for changes. A kid who's been happy and out there and playing or whatever, it all of a sudden starts to get quieter, or starts to isolate themselves, or starts to not share very much, or they start losing interest in things that they normally would be interested in. You can't get them to go outside. They want to hang out in their room. They want to sleep a lot. So I think if you see changes in that kind of way, it might raise a flag that says, my kids is struggling with something. And a lot of the times when I see girls in my counseling practice, but they come in, some of them have been diagnosed with depression or anxiety or things like that. Where I find a lot is that they don't really deserve a diagnosis of those things. What they're showing is symptoms of overload. And in this day and age, even in our quarantine times, it's really easy to stay busy and distracted with our devices and with scrolling walls and all those kinds of things, social media. And so what happens is kids have learned pretty well how to not feel things and not think about things they don't want to think about. And it works to distract yourself, but those feelings don't go away, and they start to build up. And then when they build up to the point of overload or overwhelm, they have to go someplace. And they'll tend to leak out as stomach aches or headaches or snapping at people or anxiety or depression or being distracted or having a hard time falling asleep. So sometimes the symptoms we see with kids is just a symptom of just a lot of things they're not taken care of, and they need to start expressing things.
What are some ways that parents should go about to try to help decompress things when that arises?
Well, I think a lot of families are doing this, like going outside there's a whole body of research that shows that when you just go outside in green space in nature, that in and of itself is calming and grounding.
Mm-hmm.
And so spending time outdoors, walking, hiking, riding bikes, keeping safe and keeping your distance and all that. But still, there's a lot of ways to be outside. That's one thing. And just family time. I've been encouraging families to sit down and brainstorm. What are some things that we can do together as a family? Or things that would maybe kind of, because kids and families are getting kind of bored with this 6 weeks of constraint. So what are some ways as a family that we can start bringing some energy? And so kids and families I've talked to are doing things like every night they have a different themed dinner. And one of the kids will take responsibility for cooking it.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing game nights where they do different games on different nights.
Right.
They can start to figure out what are some things that we can do to kind of bring some energy to the family, do some things that are fun, interesting, maybe do some kind of a service project together. There's families who are doing those 1,000-word puzzles on the kitchen table, but things that they can do together, connect, but also, this is important for teens, also respect, they also need their alone time.
Okay.
It's great to have family time, the meals and the games. Families are telling me that this is the silver lining, is that they're playing games again. Their kids are bored, they say, go outside and play, which is what my parents said to me, a long time ago. And we've gotten away from that. We've gotten into a habit of just keeping them busy and supervised with all these activities and sports and club teams. And so this is an opportunity that our kids are getting to go outside and make your own fun. Supervise yourselves, go in the backyard, create some games. So I think that's another way to help decompress, is just allow them to let their creativity, allow them to play and create games and fill in their time.
So my kids are doing a lot of schoolwork now through the school district by Zoom and YouTube and other online platforms to try to stay somewhat in touch with things. But then, of course, there's always that trend that they want to go to the video games and the TV as well. What's your thoughts on screen time with all this at-home time we have?
I would sit down, even though we're maybe we're halfway-ish through this thing. Who knows how where we're at with it, but it's never too late to sit down as a family and say, let's brainstorm some ideas about our routine, because obviously this isn't the school year routine, and we've had a month or 5 weeks or 6 weeks, depending upon where you live, where it's been disrupted. So I'm a little concerned about screen time, but I also know you need screen time because you need to talk to your friends. That's the only way you can connect. So let's try and figure out as a family what would work as far as your schoolwork, as far as screen time, as far as exercise, all those things. But so instead of mom or dad coming with new rules and sort of pressing them on kids, I would say let's have a conversation. So because I want to hear what you guys think too. And so I would brainstorm ideas about that. And what a lot of the kids who are doing the best, in my experience, because I'm still counseling kids like this through Zoom and FaceTime, are the ones who have decided that they need to wake up in the morning. Because some of them, for a while, the teens especially, were sleeping till noon, 1 o'clock, and staying up till 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and then their whole day was kind of sluggish, and they started getting behind with that online work. So what they've been doing is they've established a time like 9 o'clock-ish or 9:30 where they actually get up and maybe they take a shower, they walk or do something, and then they get down to their work. And then for most of them don't have much more than a couple hours, I've been finding, of work. Even the college students I'm talking to, they're done usually within a few hours. And so, by noonish, they're done. Then the rest of the day they can play. But I would talk about what will you do with the rest of your day then? And I think it's okay to spend some time talking to your friends and FaceTiming and all that kind of things. And I've also been telling kids, this is a great opportunity for you to start doing some things that you've never had time for. I ask your kids questions like, what are some things you've said, boy, I really wish I could do that, but there's no time because of basketball, or because I'm in gymnastics 12 days a week, or all that kind of thing. So what are some things that you've had an interest in, maybe a little passion in, but you haven't done because of that, and now you have the time. So I've had some kids who are starting to learn how to do photography. I've had some kids doing some sewing, some cooking, painting, drawing. There's all kinds of things that there's a lot of kids who learn how to play ukulele, learn how to play guitar. They go online. It's really easy. So I would brainstorm with your kids. What are some useful ways you can use your time? We're at the end of this it'd be great to look back instead of saying I watched YouTube or I watched 50 series on Netflix, to be able to say I learned how to play ukulele, or I got back in the habit of painting, and now I'm going to incorporate that into my school schedule next year because I saw how valuable it was for me to have some kind of quiet time like that to be creative.
Sure, that's a good idea. We just started with my son doing guitar, and we got him someone who's doing the lessons for a half hour a week during the by the internet. So he practices throughout the week on his own, some solo time,
Yeah.
and then he's got someone kind of instructing him on the do's and don'ts, at the end of the week. So, but he never even really thought about doing that, and he's brought it up, and we're like, yeah, we got plenty of time. Let's do it. So good.
So if it comes from them, it's their interest, then they'll be more engaged in it. They'll be more willing to practice and have fun with it. If it's something that we make them do, then you're going to probably get resistance and pushback and procrastination. So I think but most kids they'll come up with something. If they don't initially, I'd say, well, then think about it. Let's just, think about it. We'll talk about it again tomorrow. I want you to be able to use this time in some way to develop yourself. It's okay to watch some movies. It's okay to, go on Instagram, but also there's a lot of time, right? If you get your schoolwork done by noon and you don't go to bed till 10, that's 10 hours.
Right.
So let's make sure we're spending some time outside, some time with family, some time with some alone time, and also some time with developing yourself in some way.
Now, Dr. Jordan, you also have a new book that just came out. She Leads, A Practical Guide to Raising Girls Who Advocate, Influence, and Lead. Can you tell us a little bit about your book?
Yeah, I became more and more aware. I've been working with girls in my counseling practice, just girls, the last dozen years. And our summer camps, our weekend retreats all became all girls for a lot of reasons, mostly because I think there was a need. But what I've realized was that we've been talking about empowering girls since the 1980s, 70s, and 80s. You go girl, empower girls, that kind of a thing. And there's also all kinds of stuff in the literature about adult women, about leaning in and, you can be all you can be and all those kinds of things. But what I realized was we haven't really talked about for parents, what are some very practical things you can do as your girls are growing up to prepare them to take charge of their lives and be leaders. So I thought it'd be good to give some really, I think, are practical suggestions about ways you can help your girls learn how to advocate for themselves. I think social emotional intelligence is extremely important for our leaders. Sometimes we see a lack of that in our world today. Yeah. The ability to create win-wins, the ability to take care of themselves, the ability to there's so many ways that we can teach them. Let me give you one quick example.
Sure.
We're doing a lot of watching, our president, Dr. Fauci, all kinds of people in the news giving us advice about things and who are leading us. And so sometimes people criticize leaders. Actually, oftentimes people criticize leaders. But what I have kids do instead is to say, get in their shoes. And if you were president of the United States, if you were Dr. Fauci, if you were the principal of your school, if you were the coach of your team, how would you handle this issue or this problem? So you get your kids to be thinking about, well, if I was a leader, so they start to think of themselves as leaders instead of victims. That's just like one example. So I think I wanted parents to have some practical ways to help raise their daughters. And most of the things in the book also would apply to boys. But since I work with girls, most of the stories are about girls. To help them, it's not necessarily to develop a girl who becomes president of the United States. It's more about being in charge of their life.
Right. So, with Kobe Bryant's unfortunate passing, the hashtag Girl Dad became real popular across social media recently. And there's been a new emphasis on men parenting the girls in their lives. Do you think that this book would be helpful for that type of approach?
Yes. And I think, I've done a lot in the last 20 years. My wife and I have been teaching some father-daughter retreats for girls in grade school, middle school, and high school, all over the world, actually. And so I've watched and worked with dads with their daughters in ways they can be valuable. And I think there's some unique ways that the dads are supportive of their daughters. It's different than their moms. That may sound sexist, and I'm sure I'll get a lot of backlash, but I think it's just true.
Yeah.
There's some ways that we are a little bit different than their moms. And I think I want dads to know that the way they approach things is valuable. Even something as simple as the way we teased girls. that banter going back and forth. It's kind of fun. And moms don't do that as much as I think dads do. And that prepares girls to be able to not take things personally. It
Right.
prepares girls to be able to, send it right back. It prepares them to be around boys and be comfortable, because that's what guys do, right? In middle school, high
Right.
school. So they
Yeah.
make fun of each other and they're joking around. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of things that we do with as dads that I think are different. I want us to value that.
So is your book aimed more for moms and dads, or is it, would there benefit for kids to read it, or for young adults or young ladies in their 20s? What's your real
I would
focus for the
say
audience?
the main focus is parents, but I also think young adults. I also think even girls in high school I've had read it, from some of my campers and girls who I know, and they're getting a lot out of it. And what's fascinating is a lot of the women who have read it, one of their, besides getting tools for parenting their daughters, they're also realizing all the things they missed growing up that they wish they had the
Right.
awarenesses and all the biases and the stereotypes. They become much more aware of how they've been limited growing up and
Yeah.
what they missed out on, which is interesting.
Are there any points you cover in the book that you think would be really relevant to the pandemic we're facing now?
Well, one of the ways is to encourage your kids, boys and girls. How can they take a leadership role? And there are a lot of ways that you can lead. It's interesting in our culture. And I've done this at our camps and retreats. I'll ask girls, who are the leaders in your school? And they always say the same people. It's the student council president, it's the team captain, it's the popular girl, it's the queen bee. And if you ask people in the culture who are our heroes, it's first responders, it's people in the army, it's athletes. We don't mention, the girl who's kind to everybody, the
Right.
girl who
That's a good
notices
point.
somebody who's upset at school and says, hey, come sit at our table. The girl who has good boundaries, the girl who the girl who will handle their conflicts directly with other kids. There's so many ways that girls and boys can be leaders that we don't really acknowledge enough, because we're so enamored with all the bigger things. So there are ways that girls, even and boys, can lead through this crisis by, Greta Thunberg is an example.
Yeah.
She started out as a single girl. She was like, I think 12 or 13, saw a video in school about the effects of the environment on animals and things, and she was devastated. She didn't eat for 3 months. She lost 20 or 30 pounds. She was so upset. Then she decided to do something about it. So she took a sign and sat at the steps of the parliament, and as a way of saying, we need to start worrying about or thinking about the future. And then that single girl became 2 people and 10 people, and all of a sudden it's a worldwide movement,
Right.
an activism kind of movement. So maybe every girl's not going to be that big, but it doesn't have to be big. It's just about doing something to be an example to your younger siblings in your family,
Right.
doing random acts of kindness, taking care of yourself, and using that as an example of the ways to lead. There's so many ways, I think, that kids are valuable and leaders, and we don't just acknowledge it enough.
Right. So, Dr. Jordan, if someone wants to get She Leads, a practical guide to raising girls who advocate, influence, and lead, where can they pick up the book?
They can get it on Amazon, they can get it on Kindle, they can get it on all those kinds of places. And they also can go to our website. It's just drtimjordan.com, like drtimjordan.com. You can get it that way as well. But it's in bookstores, it's in all those kinds of, I think it's in 76 different distribution channels. I don't even know all of them, but
Right.
they can find it pretty easily.
Well, we have a lot of time, a lot of us, to do some reading, and it sounds like a really good parenting guide for many of us. I think I'm going to be picking it up myself, so I'm glad we had a chance to chat about it.
I made it short and sweet, because a lot of parents tell me today, I don't have time to read a big old fat book. So it's only about 115 pages. It's
Good.
short and sweet, but to the point, so that people can get a lot out of just not having to spend 20 hours reading.
Okay. So I just have a couple quick questions to wrap up.
Yeah.
One is, especially when you're dealing with elementary school age children, we just had a 5-year-old girl pass away from the coronavirus at a hospital a few miles from our house. How honest should you be with children about situations like that?
Well, I think when kids come to us with questions, with thoughts about, why did she die, or what happens when you die, or whatever the question may be, I think it's important to usually to always answer the question with a question. Like,
Okay.
where'd you hear that? Or what do you think? Because what you're trying to do, depending upon that child's age, you're trying to get a sense of where are they at developmentally and what information are they actually asking for.
Right.
It's just like if it came up to you and said, something about, how do babies happen? You can go into this 3-hour lecture about the birds and the bees and all that. Or you could say, why are you asking? Well, the kid down the street said something about a stork. Oh, okay. You just need that information.
Right.
So number one, I would try and figure out what they're actually asking for and needing and give them that information. I think in general, information is good for kids to have
Okay.
because that's one way to help them to feel more safe. But one of the things that they're usually asking for, if they're a young kid, you said elementary school, I think, what
Right.
they're asking for a lot underneath their questions is,
Mhm.
are we going to be safe? Are
Right.
you going to be safe? Are you going to be there for me? I want to make sure, I worry about my parents, not being there to take care of me. That's a worry underneath a lot of kids' questions. So you
Right.
can give them information about how you're taking care of yourself. There's a lot of adults in this world who are doing a lot of things to help take care of everybody so people are as safe as they can be. And
Right.
if they're asking about death and what happens after death, to me, and again, everybody has their own beliefs. My belief is
Mhm.
I would ask the kids what they think, what happens after death, get their ideas. Because at least in my world, we don't really know.
Yeah.
Nobody like really knows, right?
Yeah.
So it's okay for them to have their own private logic, their own, younger kids will use their imaginations to try and make themselves feel better about a lot of things. So if they give you a story about something, I would just say, it sounds like you've been thinking about it. It sounds like a good idea. Sounds
Okay.
like it's making you feel better. So good for you.
Yeah. All right.
If it's an older kid, then you can have open discussions about what do you think, and then you can tell
Mhm.
them these are my views about what happens after you pass away. And you can, to me, an open conversation is what kids need.
Okay. Good. And there's been with social media, there just seems to be a whole lot of people expressing opinions out there about all sorts of things. Sometimes it's founded in fact and science, and other times it's just pure opinion. A lot of that's going on with tips about how to stay safe and deal with this situation. I know you do mostly the counseling, but from a medical perspective, what should parents really know about what do they need to do to keep their families safe right now in this situation?
To me, I think I'm kind of a common sense kind of person, and I think what makes common sense to me, plus reading literature and things, is the physical distancing. I think there's a lot of data all over the world that says that's helped a lot.
Okay.
The social distance, the physical distance. So I think I would keep maintaining that. I also think that's important to wash our hands, even in the home, because groceries come into the house. This may sound weird, but in the morning time, I actually get a newspaper still, like a paper newspaper,
Yeah.
and it's usually wrapped in a wrapper. So somebody has touched that. So I bring it
Yeah.
in, put it on the table, and I wash my hands.
Right.
So I think washing your hands and being conscious of that, not being in big groups, it's so tempting now to start wanting to have all your friends over, and you may not, and it may be okay, but you don't know who's been in touch with that friend.
Right.
And a lot of the kids, those third graders today, were talking about people in their families. They have grandparents. They have people in their families who are sick.
Right.
So that's the part to me. It still makes sense of keeping our distance for a while until this thing is better under control. And also not to forget, we've talked about not to forget about your kids' emotional health.
Right.
Besides the physical stuff, to make sure that they have a space to talk about things, to bring things up, that all their emotions are okay, and that you give them some healthy ways to express it.
Okay, good. So are there any insights and tips that you might want to share that I haven't asked you specifically about and we haven't covered yet?
Two things, and one of them is self-care. So you can have some discussions with your kids, the whole family, like what are some things you're doing to take care of yourself? And it can be
Mhm.
things like exercise and getting enough sleep. And
Mhm.
some of the teen girls I work with are doing their nails, and some are dyeing their hair. They're doing things that make them feel good.
Right.
Yoga classes, going outside, riding their bikes, taking walks with their dog, having family time with their parents. I would talk about what are some things you can do to keep taking care of yourself. That's one thing. And the second
Okay.
thing is gratitude. I think what we focus on is really important. And if the main focus in the family is fear and watching the news, then that's going to have a huge effect on your kids' emotions. If instead you can get them to talk about journal about, think about things that they appreciate, things that they're grateful for in their lives. Yeah, you can't be in a state of gratitude and a state of anxiety or anger or depression. You just can't. So I think anything that we can do to keep gratitude at the top of our list of things, gratitude and service, being of service to other people. Those are, to me, are the two best preventative medicines for kids' mental health.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you today for sharing some great advice and tips with us. And I hope you stay safe and keep doing the great work you're doing out there.
Thanks. I really appreciate you having me on. I appreciate it.
All right, take care.
Okay, take care.